Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Thank you for joining us this evening for this panel discussion on criminalizing Islam, the Western European panel discussion. So why are MPACUK UK doing this event, Criminalizing Islam? The simplest and bluntest answer to this question is that we see normative Islamic practices being used as markers for extremism. What does that mean in plain English? It means that, for example, if a child expresses an Islamic opinion in school, he may be interviewed by police. It means that so-called counter-violent extremism or preventing violent extremism, CVE or PVE for short, these policies single out Muslims when they are applied on a national level. This event is the Western Europe panel and will be the first of a series, inshallah, as we track the spread of counter-violent extremism legislation and its subsequent impact on Muslims around the world. Case in point would be the UN Security Council Resolution 2178, which bound nations to CVE and PVE policies. As a community, we need to realize that we must be alert to the spread of these policies in other countries because they will end up on our own doorstep too. But we as Muslims should take heart too. If we can defeat such legislation in our own countries, not only have we stopped it here, but we can help and train other Muslims to tackle it elsewhere too. The saga begins in the Netherlands thanks to two key documents: Recruitment for the Jihad in the Netherlands, From Recruitment to Trends, and a memo titled Counter-Terrorism in the Netherlands. So we will start our discussion there. Before we start, we have some simple ground rules. The chat function is for any questions, which will be answered in the Q&A at the end, inshallah. The chat is not for provoking or responding to provocation. Anyone who breaks this simple rule will be removed. Questions from our Zoom audience will be prioritized. And if there's time, we will come to questions from our Facebook audience. To join in on Zoom at our next event, book a ticket on Eventbrite and look out for updates on our social media. And lastly, if you want to see more of these kinds of events, join our team as a volunteer. There will be links in the chat. With no further ado, our first speaker is Samira Sabir, based in the Netherlands. She is a practicing lawyer with SLS Juristen and sits on the board of a Dutch mosque committee. She will be sharing the work she has done to reveal the witch hunt against Muslims and Islamic institutions in the Netherlands and an upcoming work she's been doing on Project Ummah. It gives me great pleasure to host her in today's event. Please go ahead.
Brother. Assalamu alaikum. I am Samira, based in Holland. I would like to make use of this platform to explain to you our current case. So I rather have a case study instead of a lecture or a presentation or whatever. The Netherlands is known in the international community as the country that has excessive counterterrorism measurements. Think about administrative control measures that target individuals based on mere suspicion, on the basis of indications that they might pose a threat in the future. Leading to even revoking the Dutch nationality. So we have to do with very broad and vaguely defined laws executed by powers and authorities that are also not bound to any kind of accountability mechanism. So in fact, individuals, let's say Muslims, are subjected to laws that are not divined, or there is no information about possible consequences, or they don't even have effective access to the information. So the problem with the counter-terrorism legislation in Holland is that it's no longer only the threat of violence, actual violence or potential violence, but it's also about anti-integration or anti-democratic or anything that doesn't fit the current social cohesion. So the security discussion has moved from focusing on violence to doesn't fit the Dutch democracy. I would like to go into the case by showing you a short video describing the case we're facing now.
Wat is salafistisch?
Mijn vraag is of u wist dat ze banden hadden met een salafistische organisatie.
Ik moet eerst weten wat een salafistische organisatie is.
Maar ik stel u hier de vraag.
Nee, maar goed, ik moet beantwoorden.
Ja? Dus ik
En
vraag u een antwoord
moet
te geven.
beantwoorden wat is wat ik niet begrijp. Ik weet niet wat u bedoelt met salafistisch. Is dit dezelfde begrip zoals ik het weet?
Onder andere om politieke invloed, via politieke invloed, ergens binnen te komen.
Wij worden gedwongen opgeroepen als getuigen. En het is alleen moslims.
Dat kan gewoon niet. Hè? Grondwettelijk is het gewoon zo dat we hier in Nederland de afspraak hebben met elkaar. Dat we elkaar niet op religiositeit of kleur of andere kenmerken onderscheiden. Ja, en dat werd hier dus heel duidelijk wel gedaan.
Dus je voelt als een moslim voel je je beperkt in het belijden van je geloof. Maar ook in je vrijheid van doen en laten. En dat je toch anders wordt behandeld als een soort tweede rang staatsburger van dit land.
Het gaat toch over buitenlandse financiering?
Het is niet voor niks dat ik daarnaar vraag. Er gaan natuurlijk verhalen dat er ook tassen met geld rondgaan.
Door uw specialist van afgelopen maandag. Tassen geld met geheime of met privéjets in Zwitserland en dan complete onzin. Ze hadden al een voorgepland eindpunt waarop ze wilden uitkomen. En alle vragen en ook de volgorde van de sprekers en de mensen die ze hebben uitgenodigd, die moesten allemaal bijdragen om op dat eindpunt uit te komen. Hebben ze nu eindelijk een rapport waarin ze kunnen zeggen, ja, dit rapport geeft aan dat er ongewenste beïnvloeding is door buitenlandse financiering.
U heeft mijn vraag beantwoord. U heeft mijn vraag beantwoord. Nee, maar u heeft mijn vraag al beantwoord, dus ik ga u nu een nieuwe vraag stellen.
Ik bepaal of dat ik beantwoord heb, niet u. Ik bepaal of dat ik beantwoord heb, want anders bent u mijn antwoorden aan het afhakken.
Meneer
en dan
Salam.
bent u niet eerlijk met mijn antwoorden aan het omgaan. Nee meneer, ik ben niet in de rechtbank.
Nu stelt de heer Schoonis nog een aantal vragen
ik
over
ben
de
niet in de
financiën.
rechtbank. U bepaalt niet wat mijn antwoord is.
Nee, maar ik ga wel over
Zelfs
de
de
orde.
rechter bepaalt niet wat mijn antwoord is, dus u ook niet.
Nee, maar ik
U
ga
heeft
wel
uw
over
taak,
de
ik heb
vergaderorde
mijn
en ik
taak.
verzoek u nu om mee te werken aan dit verhoor. En u bent daar ook toe gehouden. Meneer Salam, ik
zie alleen
ontneem
maar
u
dat
nu het
mij aan
woord
overschreeuwen
en ik
bent.
geef de gelegenheid aan de heer Schoonis om opnieuw een vraag te stellen.
Ik zie dat u aan mij...
Ja. Schoonis.
Dat is iemand mond dicht maken?
Waarom wordt de moslims in dit geval misbruikt voor een politieke campagne?
Maar het was juist de Tweede Kamer die besloten heeft om alleen maar de moslimgemeenschap te criminaliseren. Want zo hebben al die organisaties die hieraan hebben meegewerkt of moesten meewerken, hebben zich altijd als verdachte gevoeld. Ondanks dat je dus eigenlijk niks hebt gedaan wat de wet niet toelaat. Maar je werd vanaf dag 1 werd je eigenlijk daar als een crimineel gecriminaliseerd en als een verdachte behandeld ook.
So what we just saw was the parliament. In Holland, it's formed by the first and second chamber, so the House of Representatives, the second chamber, and the first chamber, the Senate. They were led or driven actually by a media article saying that the Muslim community receives money from other countries, and with receiving this money, there could be potentially any kind of influence. The second chamber had a whole discussion about this, and they came to adopt a motion which by law cannot be, of course, discriminatory. it should be a neutral question, but by the context and the setting and the article that led to this discussion, you can understand that it is about the Muslim community. So the formulated purpose of the research was what undesirable influence is exerted on civil society and religious organizations in the Netherlands, such as mosques, from unfree countries, and how can this influence be broken through? They just added such as mosques in there to direct their focus on this question, which in fact was a very weak attempt to conceal the target, the Muslims and the Muslim community. What happened is that the Muslim community, the representatives of the Muslim community, think of the biggest mosques in Holland. Their chairmen were summoned to come to the inquiry setting, where the parliament used, or actually misused, the right to inquire, to arrange and organize a parliamentary inquiry under the setting you just saw, you just witnessed, where I think this is important to understand that law. So there's a protocol and there's an act on parliamentary inquiry, which says that the parliament can, if it wants, have different witnesses put forward under oath. So it's a very heavy instrument under the public eye to answer questions they need answers on, to conduct their work. This is an option which they are not bound to use. Seeing the witnesses, so these are individuals, common men, common Muslim men, with their private lives and their own interests, the parliament did persist in the public setting. So this whole event was live streamed, where they were treated as suspects instead of as witnesses to get to their research answers. The individuals, they were chairmen of the biggest mosques in Holland, which were again divided by Salafi mosques and potential Muslim Brotherhood mosques. And this is what happens in Holland, where in the beginning we all faced counter-terrorism legislations on clear violence or clear potential violence and threats. Now the term Salafi or Muslim brother has been criminalized. And the setting you see is as if they are in a court setting without the rights an accused has, you know, the right to attorney, right to be informed, right to not incriminate themselves by not answering, because these people were bound to answer and they were even cut in their answers. It's a yes or no and no further explanation. They had to answer questions that had nothing to do with foreign influence. They had to do with Islam. So as crazy as do you celebrate birthdays? It had to do with a private individual rather than, you know, the undesirable influence or the potential of it. What happened to those people is that the media picked on, of course, this whole setting. This is the second time in Dutch parliamentary history that the parliament used this instrument to come to their answers. I mean, there are less invasive options to get to the research questions. Even if you would discriminate the Muslim community by target only them, you can also do that behind closed doors instead of live streamed. The media picked up on this topic, and they were connecting every individual there with threat, with national security threats, with Salafi as defined today by the politics in the media. There is no actual right definition, as you saw in the beginning of the video, which had direct consequences in the private lives of these people, but also of Muslims as a community. Because you're either a good Muslim, which doesn't show that they are Muslim, There's no external signs of being a Muslim, or you're Muslim as they know, who is not visible. They see you on the streets, but they don't get in touch with you because you're outside of the community. They label you as being a Salafi, or you're visible, you're active, and you're practicing, and you might be a Muslim Brotherhood member, which took a secret oath. It's very, very scary to see the second chamber in this setting. I mean, these are people who represent us asking the questions like they did, which are already very loaded with Islamophobic definitions. Coming to a report at the end, I mean, the whole instrument failed because they didn't get to actual proof of undesirable influence. As in Holland we say, wie betaalt bepaalt, whoever pays decides. They didn't get to prove this. However, they did conclude in their report that yes, there is influence undesirable from unfree countries. God knows what is unfree country except for the definitions they gave, which are Morocco, Turkey, and whoever is connected with the Muslim immigrants in Holland. And they, of course, didn't divine what it means to have influence and what this influence should be. Yet the report is there, and it's a validation on more counterterrorism legislation to target the common Muslim man. What we see is that there is a new law drafted, making it even more difficult to receive funding. And in the Netherlands, the Muslim community lives differently from the Muslims, I think, in the UK, because here in Holland we have second or third generation Muslims. We don't have a big history of generations of Muslims building up their own means and own streams of finances. We are dependent on whatever we earn here and whatever donations we can get from outside of Holland. Think of Kuwait, Qatar, Turkey, and Morocco. So it's a direct limitation on our freedom of religion. Also, what effect it had is that the common Muslim bank client, so every Muslim, every individual uses a bank account. I mean, this is a fact. What happens is that the banks noticed the harsh lines of the government saying that every euro that comes to Holland needs to be checked and needs to be explained. And we need to know the sources of this euro. So they put the banks on the excessive task to do the checks and balances, but actually more the checks to see what and how the Muslim community is receiving money and spending money. There is this law, which is of course neutral and objective in wording, but in practice, it's another Muslim law saying that if there's a suspicious transaction going on, then the bank is bound to research this. In the last few, last years since this event, the common Muslim man received questions from banks saying, why did you buy this hijab? Because I assume they work with algorithms where if you don't answer according to their satisfaction, you're thrown out of your bank. And it's very worrisome. That it worries me to see that so many normal Muslim businessmen are now deprived from their bank accounts, and they don't get to open another bank account because they are listed in some kind of list, a blacklist, as someone with a risk profile, a term we all know from the counterterrorism legislation. We also see that Muslim communities, organizations don't get to open bank accounts anymore. I think it's very important to understand that the counterterrorism legislation is not for terrorism anymore. It's not for violence anymore. It's for anything that doesn't fit the democratic definitions of today and the standards. And talking about unwanted behavior could already fall under the measures that are drafted.
Shukran, Sister Samira, for your comprehensive explanation of how normal daily life for Muslims is being impacted in the Netherlands by counter-terror legislation. And thank you for sharing that video with us of the work that Project Ummah has been doing. I thank every speaker who has stayed on with us. With the most grateful. Jazakumullah khairan. May Allah reward you with better. We will end the live stream there.